Thank you very much, Lascar. At the outset, can I acknowledge the Taoiseach's proactive response to the Women of Honour, and indeed, as we welcomed on Taoiseach earlier, can I welcome my colleague, Minister Peter Burke, to the House now. I think I want to say at the outset, and it's important to state this for a context, that the defence forces in our country are of the highest calibre, that they bring honour to our country, and that they provide an exceptional service to our country. Currently, we have members of our defence forces serving in Lebanon in very difficult conditions, and among those, and I'm sure his dad here was very proud of him, among those is the son of Senator Wilson, who's serving in the Lebanon currently, and there are a number of others from my county that I know and their families. And we can be very proud of these people. It is because our defence forces are of such calibre, because they add lustre to our state and they bring honour to themselves and our state. It is for this reason that the minority, and I stress the word minority, who sullied their name must be outed in every sense of the word. I want to acknowledge the appointment of Miss Justice Anne Power, who is, as was said earlier, a person of great eminence, to do this job. I want to also, before I go into more of the detail, as I saluted our defence forces in general and their personnel, can I also salute the Women of Honour who are among us today, I gather, and who showed great courage, great persistence and great resilience, and you do deserve great credit. It is very difficult to do what you did, and it takes great strength to do that, and you persisted with it, and I want to salute that. You do the defence forces and yourselves and your families and the country a great service in that regard. I suppose to go through some of the background briefly, in January 2022, the government approved the appointment of a judge-led independent review to examine dignity and equality issues in the defence forces. And although not a fact-finding issue, the report revealed a pattern of unacceptable behaviour, misogyny, discrimination, harassment and sexual misconduct within the defence forces. And that's a litany that shouldn't be there. The report of the Independent Review Group, or the IRG, was published following government approval in March of 2023, and the government then accepted the recommendation to establish a statutory inquiry and establish a tribunal. The draft terms of reference were prepared in consultation with the AG and shared with a variety of interests in 2023. And I'm very happy that in preparing for this tribunal, that the Taoiseach held meetings with the stakeholders, including obviously the key group, the Women of Honour, the Men and Women of Honour group, the Secretary-General of the Department of Defence, and civil and civilian employee trade unions, the various representative bodies. That was important by way of setting the terms of reference. And all groups and individuals who contacted the Taoiseach's office were consulted then. And these views were considered. In July 23, the government approved the establishment of a Tribunal of Inquiry pursuant to the provisions of the Tribunal of Inquiries Act of 1921. The government, in Tuesday, January 2024, approved the terms of reference for the tribunal being established to examine the effectiveness of the complaints processes in the defence forces concerning workplace issues relating to discrimination, to bullying, to harassment, to sexual misconduct, and the use of hazardous chemicals. So that's wide and should be. Now, it's important that new people, and this has been referenced earlier, that new allegations or new complaints or new statements of evidence can come forward during the lifetime of the tribunal. It is also important that the Gardaí have and will be following up specific allegations. That's a vital part of it, that no member of the Defence Forces should be exempt from the common law of the country, and there's nobody suggesting the contrary, and it's very important that it should not be the case. The addition, the women of honour who are represented here, and we're delighted to see that, and suggested the addition of physical torture, physical assault and psychological harm as a definition of abuse, and to be included in the inclusion of Protected Disclosures Act, the investigation of whether complaints were actually deterred. And this is very important, that we arrive at the end of this. Not only must we get justice for the individual women, not only must the people, the perpetrators, go through the rigours of our law and the necessary sentences thereafter, but what is also of crucial importance after this is that we have systems in place within the Defence Forces that will respond immediately to any such allegations, and that the very existence of such systems and such methodologies and such transparency, that in itself will be a deterrent. In fact, the existence of sufficient systems of inquiry, of sufficient responses, of a sufficient complaints procedure, of proper protocols, if that exists, that in itself will deter wrongdoing. But of course it will not completely remove wrongdoing, and it's for that reason that it must exist. But that must be an outcome from this, because I go back in that respect to my fundamental initial point that our Defence Forces are of such importance to us all, of such part of our national apparatus, and the merit, and we're so proud of them, that there cannot be a system in place there cannot be a system in place that will allow anyone to sully that, and that those who have damaged that, those who have brought dishonour to the Defence Forces, that they are outed in every sense of the word, and that they are the victims of, that they themselves become the subject of proper criminal investigation. I think it's important. I think, thankfully, we've arrived, and our society constantly evolves, and it's constantly, our state matures, our society evolves, new values appear, and I think there is, with the vast majority of people now, a recognition that the treatment of women in non-traditional roles, of what was not the stereotypical role for women historically, the treatment of women in new roles where they are perfectly suitable and entitled and properly entitled to be involved in, that their treatment in some instances in these roles left a lot to be desired. It was pioneering, the women who came into the Defence Forces, indeed the women who came into a lot of new bodies, new areas of work. There were pioneering women, there were trendsetters, there were adventurers in that they were going into what wasn't traditionally necessarily as understood by the culture of the time, female roles. These women led out and established a new situation, and because of the courage of these women, of the pioneer nature of what they did, there was naturally a reaction. Misogyny was a natural, unfortunate reaction in a very, I must say, a small minority of people, and that misogyny reflected itself in some ghastly fashions, and that misogyny has to be stamped out. But there is, I think we've arrived at a condition and a situation in our country now where there's no longer a tolerance for this. There's no longer an acceptance. There's no longer any acceptance that this kind of thing can or should exist. So I think it's a good day's work. I'll conclude in saying I personally welcome the tribunal. I hope that it is speedy, that it is efficient, that it does recommend new structures, new systems, new protocols for dealing with complaints, and that out of that there is action, and that there are necessary criminal proceedings against wrongdoers subsequently. So on that basis I leave it, and thank you for the opportunity, Oscar.